Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this indeed joint press conference. Now we get a new song. Can we switch the music off? Okay. So good afternoon to all of you, and thanks for coming. Before I start, a quick word on ACEA. So ACEA is the advocate of the automotive industry in Europe, representing the 15 manufacturers of cars, trucks, vans and buses with production sites all over the European Union. Vehicle manufacturers currently operate almost 300 assembly and production plants across the European continent. They offer manufactured components like engines and transmissions in one country and assemble the final vehicle in another. So all this would be impossible without the European single market, which enables the free movement of goods, capital, services and people. So these four freedoms are key to Europe's economic growth, manufacturing, employment and competitiveness. And it is on this very basis that ACEA's members have developed their business operations in the European Union in terms of their supply chains, production sites and distribution networks. At the core of the business model of each OEM is a fully integrated value chain. Indeed, the single market has enabled us to develop into a globally competitive sector, making a significant contribution to the EU economy. Our industry provides 12.2 million Europeans across the value chain jobs and contributes 6.5% to the EU's GDP. So how does fit the UK into this picture today? In short, the European Union is the UK's biggest export market. More than half of all the cars, 90% of all the commercial vehicles, and around half of the engines built in the UK last year were bought by customers in Europe. The other way around, last year the EU exported 2.4 million vehicles to the UK, worth about 42 billion euros. And this represents 31% of the EU global vehicle export value, and more than 80% of the UK's motor vehicle import volume. 7 out of every 10 new cars sold in the UK come from EU plants. And the UK's top trading partners in the EU are Germany, Spain, France, Belgium, Poland and Italy. Now the ramifications of Brexit for automotive trade and market access are still difficult to predict. So we are not able to tell you today what is going to happen next. We would have loved to do that. But what we want to do, however, is to highlight some of our industry's key concerns on the potential implications of Brexit, especially ahead of the Brexit summit next Saturday. Today, the automotive industries of the European Union, including the UK, are closely integrated from an economic, regulatory, as well as technical point of view. Any changes to this level of integration will most certainly have an adverse impact on automotive manufacturers with operations in the EU, the UK, or in both, as well as on the European economy in general. And this impact would be mainly felt in two areas, and we want to go a bit further on that. First area is access to each other's markets. And second is the regulatory framework for automotive manufacturers and suppliers. So let me focus on access to each other's markets. My colleague, Siegfried de Vries from CLEPA, will focus on the regulatory implications, amongst other issues. Now we see, when it comes to access to each other's markets, we see two major risks here. First, the introduction of import duties or tariffs, and of course burdensome and costly customs procedures. From a tariff point of view, if the UK leaves the single market without any measures in place to replace the current system, the free circulation and tariff-free flow of goods between the 27 EU member states and the UK will no longer be guaranteed. This could result in the introduction of automotive tariffs of 10% for passenger cars, 10 to 22% for commercial vehicles, like trucks and buses, and 3 to 4% on average for parts and components. Assuming that UK would introduce the same most favored nation tariffs as currently applied by the European Union. When it comes then to customs procedures, setting up border checks between the EU27 and the UK would also require formal import and export procedures in order to access the other party's market. It goes without saying that such custom borders would add significant costs to our operations. In addition, the introduction of these procedures would put custom systems across Europe under significant pressure. Port congestion, for example, may endanger the just-in-time production systems that are so vital to the European auto industry. It is important to understand that automotive manufacturers usually operate in 4 to 7 year product cycles, which require long-term business planning. That is why stable, legal and regulatory framework is imperative to take decisions on future investments and production in our industry. Given all that is at stake, it will be crucial to resolve uncertainty and to bridge the gap between the UK's withdrawal from the European Union and the entry into force of a new EU27 UK agreement. Now, at the same time, concluding here, I would like to reiterate the European automobile industry's continued support for the EU project. The achievement of the European Union over 60 years of European integration have been of enormous benefit to the automotive sector as well as to our customers. That's why we sincerely hope that Brexit will not jeopardize these accomplishments. Thank you, and I would like to hand over to Siegfried.
Yes, good afternoon, also from my side. A few words about CLEPA. First of all, CLEPA is the European Association of Automotive Suppliers, and we represent over 100 multinational suppliers of car parts, systems and modules, as well as over 20 national trade associations and European sector associations. So in total, CLEPA represents about 3,000 companies, including many SMEs. Eric already mentioned it. The European automotive industry is a key asset to the European economy, and the single market is a fundamental driver of competitiveness for the European automotive industry. This is clearly visible in the ground plan of European automotive manufacturing today. Vehicle manufacturers and component suppliers are part of a highly integrated manufacturing network across Europe. And let me just try and illustrate what that means. A single part may be composed of over 30 components and undergo over 100 process steps to become a finished product. And it may pass 15 countries and cross borders multiple times in its material journey. And a single vehicle then, in turn, consists easily of around 30,000 parts. So thanks to the single market, parts can follow their most efficient manufacturing flow, completely free from tariffs, from import duties and from other restrictions on the movement of goods. They face no custom requirements, no export controls. There are no risks of having goods held up, checked at borders, which would incur delays. So in other words, the supply chain can be lean and also meet high frequency delivery demands without having to build up an inventory. And all of this, the whole list, is really crucial for the sector's global competitiveness. And our prime goal as an industry, therefore, is to maintain the EU single market and make it stronger to the benefit of all its members. And when dealing with Brexit, the aim must really be to mitigate its impact. Eric already mentioned some numbers on tariffs. The UK sells about 20 billion euros worth of vehicles and components to European buyers, and the country buys almost 3 times that much from Europe. And when we say mitigating impact, no tariffs is an obvious starting point. Costs will somehow have to be recovered if there were tariffs imposed, and that will impact suppliers and manufacturers, but also car buyers alike. The sticker price of cars may well go up, and that will affect demand, profitability and jobs. So currently automotive businesses benefit from tariff-free access to the UK and vice versa, and this should really continue also without disruption in the transition to this new relationship between the EU and the UK. And we'd also like to see continuity in market access to third countries and to maintain trading benefits from existing agreements and include them in potential future agreements across Europe. But most importantly, our governments and institutions, they must really recognize and facilitate the integrated supply chain in Europe. In particular, establishing regulatory continuity under the European type approval system will be really crucial to avoid divergence of standards. And why is that so important? Well, the mega trends driving automotive technology today, they can be summarized as sustainable, safe and smart mobility. And these trends are really global. So there are huge investments required in all of these fields, and the sector experiences fierce competition from other world regions. Automotive manufacturers therefore actively strive for increased harmonization and convergence of regulations globally to benefit from economies of scale, to target their investments, to pool talent, and to prevent non-tariff barriers to trade. And that's why a stable and predictable regulatory framework in Europe and the UK is crucial to sustain the industry's global competitiveness and to secure investments and jobs. And in that same spirit, we believe that the EU and the UK should continue to work as strategic partners on shared automotive R&D priorities, such as emissions reductions and connected and automated driving. Publicly funded, pre-competitive, collaborative research is key to sustain and promote European technology leadership. And last but not least, free movement of labor and professional expertise is also a prerequisite for the competitiveness of the European automotive industry. In a global industry, the ability to move people around at relatively short notice and to solve problems and fill gaps and develop international experience is really critically important. In the UK, around 10% of the industry is made up of non-UK nationals, and we see similar patterns on the continent. What matters to all of us is the ability to recruit and retain talent. So in summary, I think it's fair to say that the European automotive industry is a great supporter of the free movement of goods, capital, services and people. The industry's outlook is global, its competitiveness in Europe is key, and with regard to Brexit, tariffs are a no-go, but avoiding additional administrative and regulatory burdens is just as significant. It is in Europe's and the UK's interest to support the sector's integrated value chain, setting the right framework conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So Mike Horse is going to join Eric and Sigrid on the podium for our question and answer session. Just before I open the floor for your questions, please do note that our speakers are not able to take questions specific to company strategies or individual company plans. So with that, I'll start with you.
Martina Haas, British Press Agency PPA. I wondered if you have any figures on the percentages of cars produced and or sold in Europe that either contain components that have been manufactured in Britain, or that have been manufactured in Britain as such, as the whole car.
I don't have a specific figure, but
no, I don't think we have specific figures. You will see in your files we have tried to collect some facts and figures on export-import between UK, the continent, for both automotive as well as parts. But indeed, the combination, like you are asking, that's indeed a bit more challenging one.
Yes. Hello, my name is Mark Carlson from Associated Press. You just presented a lot of facts, but obviously facts didn't play a role in people's decision-making in choosing Brexit. Your responsibility now is to influence the negotiation. How are you going to do that, and how are you going to be effective?
Well, first of all, I mean, the reason why we are gathering today, which is already unique in itself, that we are here with 3 organizations in front of you, all representing the automotive industry, you know, being suppliers, being the OEMs, means that we want indeed to get a message across to the negotiators, and especially ahead of the summit on Saturday, that our industry is key for Europe, and I'm talking, if I say Europe, it's the 28 member states, and so we just want to make sure that in the upcoming negotiations, that the negotiators will take into account the importance of the sector across the value chain, and the impact that the negotiations can have on jobs, growth, and the competitiveness of our entire industry. We know that the negotiations haven't started yet. There's still a long way to go. But I think we thought it would be the right time today to just call upon the negotiators to really make sure that whatever they're going to undertake, and we assume that they will do the right thing, but that they take into account a sector like the automotive industry.
But how are you going to get them to care, and how are you going to actually influence them?
By making the case. We believe that the case is not known well enough, and there is a great case to make. This industry is very important for Europe. It needs free movement of labor, people, services and goods, ideally. If that cannot be in the current form, and that's the decision that has been taken, then at least the framework conditions should be such that you can maintain that and maintain global competitiveness of this industry, which is so important for all of Europe.
I think from what we've experienced thus far, there is an absolute eagerness to understand what the issues are, what the impact will be on different business sectors, including our own. And I think it's beholden on business to inform policymakers and those involved in the negotiation, so they're aware of the impact. It's clearly in no one's interests to see a reduction in living standards, employment, or anything like that.
Okay, I'll go here first.
Julia Ferretti from Reuters. It's a bit of a follow-up from that question. You're obviously not the only sector who is claiming to have a great impact on the European economy and to support lots of jobs, notably aviation, and they've also been calling for far longer for us to be taken into account in the negotiations. What makes you different, or what makes you think that they will respond positively to this call?
Well, one of I think the key differentiators probably for our sector, and Sigrid has made that also very clear, is that core of the business model in automotive is this integrated value chain. I mean, if you look at our sector, you look at all the players. For me, it's easier as representative of ACEA, where we have only 15 companies, but they're all, I mean, you can hardly call them European, they are really global players. Yeah? So what is so typical for our sector is that they think already globally, not locally, not nationally, but globally. And so core of the business model is this integrated value chain. Okay, so that's why we have embraced the single market so much, and has the single market provided lots of economies of scale for our industry, which at the end of the day have also been beneficial for the end consumer, because economies of scale at the end of the day means also less cost, and allows us to kind of come up with products which are affordable to consumers. And that is as much for parts as it is for the finished product. And the figures, again, which we are sharing with you today in the press map, highlight this kind of integrated aspect of our sector, probably more than some other sectors.
Josh Pisano from Politico. Do you see a choice in these negotiations between maintaining open access between the UK market and the EU27 and undermining the foundations of the single market? Because it seems that narrative is playing out. You have the German Association talking about how their priority is to maintain the single market and not give too many concessions away to the UK. How is your take?
I think we're quite united in our messages about this issue. I think we are great defenders of the internal market, and we have shared with you why we believe that's so important. But we've also laid out that this is all about indeed the integrated value chain, and there is an importance there to maintain that, and I think that everybody in industry really very much agrees about that, wants to make also the case for that in view of the global operations of all of this industry.
I think if I can just add to that, in the run-up to the referendum, we were very clear from half our members they wanted to remain within the single market. After the referendum, again, we were still asking that we should be looking at the opportunity to remain in the single market. Now, the British Prime Minister has made clear that she wants to control borders and wants to move away from the ECJ, and neither of those are compatible with the single market. So what we need as a sector is to retain as many of the benefits that we currently enjoy, recognising things will change, and we will not be getting 100% of what we had before.
Yes.
Thomas Friedrich, German engineers paper. You stated tariffs are no-go. I would like to ask you what would be the red lines that in the future mini cars would no longer be assembled in the UK but in the Netherlands?
In terms of a position of a tariff, I think clearly any tariff is going to be challenging to the industry. Clearly it would, if we default to WTO, it would be 10% on finished vehicles. That potentially could flow through to about £1,500 on the price of any vehicle, so any imported vehicle from Europe sold in the UK. So that would be a difficult and substantial cost to mitigate, and clearly would be to a large extent passed on to the consumer. In terms of the competitiveness, any industry clearly will respond to the challenge that's before it, and constantly does so. The competitiveness of any plant is a temporal thing and is affected by a number of factors. So all operations, we're looking to maintain their competitiveness. So you can't actually say there would be a red line at this point. Certainly what we would like is zero tariffs.
And you see that also in most of the free trade agreements that the EU is negotiating. One of the principal starting points very often is no tariff. So we would not really expect that to be a big deal.
Yeah, Lawrence from the Wall Street Journal. Two questions. First of all, you made a comment, one of you made a comment about the pressure on the customs system across Europe. And I just wanted to understand that clearly. Now, we're all focused on what would happen in Dover or the other British ports if there were customs checks. Why does that put pressure on the customs system in Europe? Can you just explain that? I foolishly don't understand it. And a question for Mike. I mean, I realise you're talking about many of the same issues as the others, but when you say, okay, it's clear we're going to be outside the single market, but we want to replicate many of the benefits that we currently have. I mean, what does that look like? Okay, fine, don't put tariffs on, but what does it look like?
But first of all, on the customs side, of course, I mean, once the UK would be outside the European Union, it's a third country. So that means, from in case you start exporting be it parts of vehicles from wherever in Europe, and of course, goods are exported to the UK not only from Dover, right? But from wherever in Europe, there are gonna be, of course, some extra custom formalities to be complied with. Which,
as well as
when your destination would be the UK as a third country, which is, of course, currently not common practice because it's not needed. It's part of one European Union, and that, of course, are customs not used to today. So it will add an extra burden to customs officials
And-
in all these countries from where we would export to the UK, and vice versa from the UK to wherever in European Union.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it's not just customers that aren't used to it today. Many companies aren't used to it today as well, and I in particular would like to refer to SMEs. The bigger, the larger companies may be able to cope better, although they would have the same issues, obviously. But at the moment, you do not have these administrative burdens or complications, if you like, at all, because you can move parts and products from one country to another without having to deal with border issues. And that's just great from a business point of view. And you would lose that. And that's a real nightmare.
And to answer your second question about what does it look like, well, those are two aspects. One's tariffs, one's some mechanism by which you can move goods, I think, frictionlessly, if there is such a word, across borders. But also we need to look at, currently we produce to a single standard and it's certified in the UK, and then you can sell that good anywhere across Europe. So we need to find some mechanism whereby that can be safeguarded. The other issue is obviously around, which was mentioned before, around people and finding a way of accessing and retaining talent. We have around 10% of the UK automotive workforce is non-UK national, predominantly from the EU, and they're very valued. And also, in terms of, as Eric mentioned, these are global companies, and if you've got a UK operation, you want to be able to move your people sometimes very quickly, and also give them international experience. So there's a number of aspects.
Can I just press you on that and the same a little bit? I mean, so what are you saying to the UK government? Are you saying we need whatever 5% of your migration quota for the industry, and also, sure, we understand frictionlessly, be able to frictionlessly, is that a word?
Yes, exactly.
Move goods across Europe. But I mean, what you're saying is that's exactly the problem. What's the third way there, where there can be some checks, but not completely disrupt that process?
But I think there we can at this stage only make our point clear on what we see as upcoming issues. It's going to be up to the negotiators at the end of the day to come up with solutions which take into account as much as possible and address as much as possible these challenges. Okay. We are not part of the negotiating team, but it's important for us at this point in time to highlight what the potential issues are up to the negotiators, and we assume they will take this wholeheartedly and take care of this in the negotiation.
Sure, I understand that, but I wonder what Mike is saying to the UK government, because they're on those two aspects of it.
Yeah, again, on the customs thing, it is about exploring what mechanisms that other countries may have. Clearly we can't be part of the customs union, but can you develop another system which mirrors a lot of those benefits? On the subject of people, what is becoming increasingly apparent looking at statements coming out of ministers, and I know we're in an election period, so take that into account as well. But there is a recognition across not just our sector, but a number of sectors that the UK has a dependence on non-UK nationals. In terms of we have high levels of employment, you need to get talent from abroad. And what I think what they're at pains is to say that it's not nationality looking at the total. It's the emphasis is on controlling what they call controlling the borders. Certainly, if you're looking at and making sure you've got the ability to ensure that your sectors which need that talent can access it by whatever mechanism you choose to implement.
Hi, so Daniel Boffey from The Guardian. Given things are going to change, are you aware currently, any three of you, of operations moving or looking to move out of the United Kingdom onto the continent, suppliers of parts or the factories making the finished product?
From the OEM side, I'm not aware.
No.
So,
I think it's uncertainty that is the predominant factor at the moment.
What we are seeing is UK automotive industry has had a tremendous run of success over the last 5, 6, 7 years. In terms of investment, we were sort of running at an average of about £2.5 billion per annum with a precision 3 or 4 years. Last year it was down to about 1.6, so it had dropped off, and that sort of bears out what we sort of find anecdotally, that I think companies are sort of sitting on their hands to a certain extent in terms of investment until there's more clarity on the situation.
Yes, first of all, Jonathan.
Leo Sanders from the I. Just following on from that, you made the point about you could not estimate the ramifications of I suppose, the hardest of Brexit. Could you give some indications about what you think might happen? I mean, have you got any thoughts on how many jobs might be lost, or how many plants might be forced to close if this isn't managed properly?
I think this would be highly speculative on our side, and I think it's too early to come up with those kind of estimates or figures. Again, they would be different from company to company as well, and all will depend on how the negotiations will take place and what the focus will be. So, too early.
Jonathan,
from Bloomberg News, to all of you. Given that the UK is not going to be part of the single market, and that there's going to be no EU-UK free trade agreement during the Brexit negotiations of the next 2 years, is the best case scenario for you the following? You have 2 years of negotiations on Brexit, status quo. Then you have a transitional period which keeps the status quo for however many years, and then you get a free trade agreement which keeps the status quo on tariffs, and then you hope you can get whatever customs arrangements that would be helpful. Is that kind of how you see it, or are there other?
We are in uncharted territory. Certainly, we are part of the European Union as part of the UK, and will be for at least another 1 year, 11 months or something. Then, and clearly there is, I think, an increasing understanding that these negotiations will probably take longer than that to get to that free trade agreement. So there is discussion around what we can call transition or implementation phases, and certainly we'd like to see a continuation of the status quo for as long as we can, obviously, because that is our preferred option, going into the referendum.
Jakob Hanke from Politico. I have a question to Sigrid first. You talked about hundreds of companies that make car parts. Can you tell us how many of those are in the UK, just to get a bit of a picture of what is at stake here? And then a question to Mike. It seems like manufacturers are more willing to come out in favor of trade with the EU now than they were before the Brexit vote. Why do you think that is? Have companies only now realized how important the trade is, or what has happened?
I can't give you exact numbers. I can say that all the multinational global players are active in the UK and from the UK, and of course there are many smaller companies as well, and I'm sure Mike can give you more specific numbers on the UK situation than I can. But you tend to have tier 1 suppliers, which are larger companies, but it goes down to tier 2, 3 and further down. Some will be very specialized, they might even be niche players serving global markets, and others are more focused on supplying another supplier who then assembles a component that goes into a finished product. So the diversity is really huge, and that's why all and every one of them will be impacted in a different way. But again, it's this network, this connected network of companies that matters so much, and that makes the whole fabric of this industry work well.
Do you have numbers in the UK?
We do, yes. GKN is a member, for example. So SMT is our member. So through SMT we have all the others as well. But
yeah, we've got about 2,500 supply chain companies in the UK. About 18 of the top 20 global suppliers have operations in the UK, because obviously we're producing around 1.7 million vehicles, so invariably you'll want your suppliers close to where you're producing them. To answer your second question, the automotive industry has been very clear ahead of the referendum and during the actual campaign and afterwards about what we wanted, and clearly what we wanted was that the UK to remain within the EU the referendum determined otherwise, and obviously we now have to respond to that result. And certainly I think all our member companies have been as supportive of our activities in this area. And it is, as I said before, it's beholden on us as an industry, individually and collectively, to make sure those involved in the negotiations understand the import and the impact that those negotiations will have on operations.
Sorry, another one. The hardline Brexiteers have said that so important is the German car industry that Angela Merkel will ensure that everything stays the same. But then today, Angela Merkel said quite a lot of people in Britain are deluded. Do you think the German car industry is so important to Angela Merkel that she'll ensure that she'll put to one side the integrity of the single market and fix it for Britain to this entirely frictionless trade?
I think you should ask the question to Angela Merkel, but it's clear, as I mentioned, there are a lot of important trading partners for the UK, not only Germany. We talked about France, we talked about Spain, we talked about Belgium. So there again, it is not one country only discussion here, when it comes to what are the implications on the European side. So there are many countries who would be affected at the end of the day. Again, and why is that? Because even if you are a German company, you would probably use parts coming from other countries. So again, we come back to the fact that our industry is perhaps unique in that respect, that it has a business model based on a fully integrated value chain, supply chain, which is developed across Europe for the moment. So whatever we're going to do, following Brexit, it will create some pain. And so the question is, how can we do it in the best possible way?
If I would just add, yes, we don't always see eye to eye with some of the hardline Brexiteers. One of them said that there was plenty of choice for UK customers just to buy British-made cars. Well, there's about 400 different models on the market, and in the UK, and it's a very small minority, but an important one that is made in the UK. And I think if you look at statements coming from the German trade association VDA, they will demonstrate the flaw in that argument that was put out there, very much aligned with their Chancellor.
Okay, I think we can take maybe one or two last quick questions.
Mark from Associated Press. Getting people to believe facts is harder than ever now. I still have not been convinced or persuaded by anything you said today that you have a strong enough argument to get people to listen to you. What is it how are you actually going to influence people at the EU, people in the UK, and public people to care about the auto industry? It's a blunt question, but it's really serious. How are you actually going to influence people to get them to believe you and accept your influence?
If I can ask something first and pass you. Following the referendum, one of our first priorities was to make sure the government got the UK automotive sector, understood, supported it, try and make it a priority sector. When the Prime Minister gave her Lancaster House speech, she specifically mentioned two sectors: financial services, not surprising for the UK, and automotive. So we're on the radar, and that's by making sure we've got the arguments, we've got the facts that demonstrate the impact, and that's something that we will continue to do. And I think certainly, you're right in terms of how do you influence and get people to understand the importance of the issues, and that's demonstrating the impact on people, on livelihoods, jobs, etc. And that's certainly, in the case of the automotive sector in the UK, a large sector which employs a lot of people, so it does matter.
And I think also that as soon as difficulties would arise, that your car that you ordered and that you're looking forward to is being delivered later, because there were delays in delivering the components that then get assembled into a car. When people only start realizing then, or feeling the consequences then, it might be far too late. So that's why we're trying at the moment to win over minds more than hearts for the time being. But we have some, I think, very good facts. We presented some of them to you today, and we'll just keep making the case for them. Because again, once we start having the actual problems, it will be too late. And I think some of these examples can be very telling.
Plus, I think what we all already highlighted is, in case there would be, tariffs coming into place, clearly the consumer will feel it as well. So prices will go up, or will have. So the likelihood that it will have an impact on pricing is real. Yeah. And then, of course, we shouldn't underestimate, what it may have as an impact on the economy in Europe, yeah, as well as in the UK. I mentioned already, we talked already about the contribution the automotive industry has to the European economy. I mean, we talk about 12 million jobs for the moment in Europe. If you look at the UK, is in the top 3 for the moment when it comes to sales in Europe, and is in the top 3 when it comes to production in Europe. So again, we have an interest to preserve that competitiveness which we currently have as an automotive industry as much as possible.
What is your position on the French elections, please?
That's right. Well, that's a matter for the French people in the same way. I think that we wouldn't get involved in those sort of discussions.
In the case of the UK, it was the same answer, but it's a crucial point nevertheless.
Well, we'll have, first of all, I mean, it's not over yet, right? So let's wait until we see the end game, and then we'll see. We have, in that respect, we are as much a privileged observer as you are, and so we can only hope that the outcome will not be negative for the way the negotiations are going to take place. So.
Okay, I can take one quick question here and then one quick one here and then yes.
One of the messages which has been coming out from the EU-27 over the past few months is that there should be no cherry picking on the single market, and yet one gets the impression from you and from your press statement is that you do want continued access to the single market, and you do want these special provisions. How do you square that with what the EU-27 is trying to say?
We know that on the European side, the guidance is not sector-specific negotiations, and that's not what we are kind of pleading for here. We are just want to make people aware of the importance of our industry, and that however the negotiations are going to be carried out, that they take into account what the impact it could have on the entire automotive industry. So, and that together with other industry sectors, obviously.
Very last question.
Yeah, mine is just a request that you come back on the question that my colleague asked about the percentage at some point, maybe via you, the percentage of cars in Europe that have some UK component to it, because it's really crucial. If it's 5%, you can imagine a scenario where that's just made in Europe and the UK is left behind. If it's 50%, it's very different. So it'd be really good to have a follow-up and have an email with that number.
It's a very difficult one to calculate, but we shall endeavour to do so.
Maybe you can say, I don't know, because you said a car has thousands of components.
Yeah.
If the answer is nearly every car in Europe has some sort of component that's introduced in the UK that would also help.
Yeah.
Okay, with that we'll wrap things up. Just before you go, I'd like to point out that the 3 associations here today have got position papers on Brexit, and they're available here at the back of the room, so you can take a look to have more details on their position. Thank you very much.
Thank you.